Yeah, I know. I'm going to look over here now. I'm not going to look over here anymore. Welcome, Martinis with Scott. Episode 9. Episode 9 on YouTube Live. If this works, we're never going back to Periscope. That's our plan. Gonna tweet this out?
Yeah.
Give a chance for some people to join if they want to join. What do we have here?
We are drinking a classic vodka martini made with Dylan's vodka.
Dylan's. Can I see the bottle? I need some olives.
Ooh.
Dylan's vodka. What's special about this?
It is made in Beamsville. It's made with rye.
Beamsville, Ontario, Canada?
Yep.
Made with rye.
And it's
Okay.
distilled 3 times.
3 times distilled.
So they're gluten-free? No, it's okay.
Senator, do you think? Can we leave the bottle right here from now on?
Sure, I think so.
How's the sound, Ashley?
We will find out.
Find out. Welcome everybody to Martinis
It
with
is good.
It's good. Welcome everybody to Martinis with Scott, episode 9. So we're checking out a different platform today as we continue to iterate and find our way through this whole podcasting video process. So the bottom line is the last 2 episodes, one with Olga and I, and one with Kevin Westfall of Accord Financial. A great financial firm. Check them out on the internet, Accord Financial. They, the Periscopes, they recorded live, great, and you can go to Periscope and look at them, great, but you can't export the video. And Ashley will tell us that the helpline at Periscope is useless. Is that fair to say, Ashley?
Worst.
The worst.
The worst.
All right. So we've been paying a producer every week to try to extract the video, extract the audio, match them up manually. More or less, that's what's going on.
Well, yeah, but he's like a technical guy once he's a producer.
He's my producer.
I think I'm your producer.
You're my sidekick.
It's like Mary Tyler Moore, but I'm all the characters except Ted.
Except for Ted. Who does that make me?
Ted.
That's just math.
Yeah.
Math for me. I would want to say I've been slanted, but that was just math.
But Cheers.
Cheers.
To our new platform.
I hope everybody has their martinis or their drinks or whatever you're doing. If you're listening on a podcast and driving, don't have a martini. Damn, that's really good, Ashley.
Nice, right?
Yeah.
Dylan's is the best.
Got a
Wait until
great
you
take.
try their grape vodka.
They have a grape vodka?
They do. They take the grapes at the end of the season and they use them to make vodka. Well, they can't call it vodka, but it's vodka.
Because it's grappa.
Basically. But
That's what I said.
it's not. It's not. It's
It's kind of.
no.
You know what the good news is?
What's that?
I love grappa.
Do you really?
Well, it's booze,
Their
right?
grape vodka is fantastic.
You're gonna love Grappa, you're gonna love Dylan's, love YouTube Live.
I don't know if I love
Space.
YouTube Live. We will see. We
I
will
will say
see.
this, the picture is clear and the audio is lining up with the video, so
So that's good. Well, you haven't tried to extract anything
fans
yet.
know it's
I don't
great.
think you'll have to.
Well, we have to extract the audio.
I did it. It works. Not
That's the
finished,
other
but I
thing,
did
by the way. We're going to narrow our platforms. So basically, we're going to focus on YouTube and iTunes podcast, right? That's what we're doing. And so all of these other peripheral platforms,
Fun.
later, some other time. The biggest one that we're getting rid of is Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
Because basically I don't have a Facebook account and I think that there may be not good people there.
Mhm.
So I'm just trying to get off that social media.
We can post this to LinkedIn too, which is good people.
Well, we
especially
post the
with your
link.
presence. Yeah.
To LinkedIn, and we market it on LinkedIn in advance, but then I forgot. We do a little checklist for this, and it goes on our website at sinclairrange.com, which leads me to Martinis with Scott, brought to you as always by Sinclair Range. Ours always so far.
Right.
By Sinclair Range. Check us out at sinclairrange.com, sinclairrange.com. We are a consulting advisory firm that helps mid-market smaller businesses. We've worked in 25 countries or more, maybe 27 countries now around the world, and companies that are experiencing transition, high growth, they need some management help and capital help, or turnaround, they need some management help or capital help. That's what we do. What's next on my list here? Platform issues we already discussed. Let me introduce Olga Jelani, Vice President of Sinclair Range.
Hi, everyone.
Who is now a regular co-host.
That's
for the most part, right?
LinkedIn, yeah.
We should add that to your CV for LinkedIn.
Media experience.
I should add it on my CV.
Absolutely.
All right. So today we're going to do, we're not going to be very long today because this is, I know we always say that.
Every time.
Every time. But we are going, we're really testing out the platform and seeing how this goes. We are doing part 3 of a series, a 10-part series that we started to help troubled businesses get financed. And today we're going to talk about firing people, which is more, it's not, I mean, that's kind of cheeky to say firing people, but often you need to replace management.
Cheeky is an interesting word for that.
You like that? I liked it. I've been doing a keto diet this week.
Okay.
Not because I really want to, but I'm doing it in support. I have 2 sick friends, really sick, and they're doing nutritional changes because of that. And I'm doing this in moral support.
Okay.
I did make an exemption for martinis with Scott on Thursday nights, but the bottom line is I'm drinking martini and I really haven't eaten all week.
Mm-hmm.
So I can throw out words like cheeky.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. When it really comes down to it,
So firing people and KPIs, key performance indicators, which to me are the heart of a turnaround plan. That's what we're going to talk about today. I don't want to go back and sort of redo the checklist. We've done it twice already. It might be boring to you to hear the 10 points, but go back and listen to whatever episodes were 1 and 2 of this 10-part series.
So episodes 6 and 5 of the overall Martini.
There you go, right off the top of your head. The premise is that financing a troubled business requires a different approach and a different pitch to financial institutions, whether that be on the debt side or the equity side. And part of that is convincing them, the prospective investor, that you get that you're in trouble and you're going to make changes, right? And so the 2 points that we've talked about in apparently episodes 5 and 6 were the first one being admit you're in trouble, stop deluding yourself. So premise there is if we see 1,000 decks a year for us to see, to see if people will, if we can help these people, 980 of them, you wouldn't even know they were in trouble when you read the deck. Maybe 990 of them, like a really high percentage. You don't know they're in trouble, right? So how do you think you feel as a lender if you see this deck and you get all excited, it's going to be a great company, things are growing, and you say, I want to know more, and you sign the non-disclosure, and you go through that process, and you start digging into the financials, and this company's got 4 years of losses, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, right? You're dead. You're dead. That's the answer to the question, and the lender feels misled. Better to admit that you're in trouble and hit the issue on the head. And then the second thing we talked about in number 6 was was that recognizing that the trouble, certainly in mid-market and smaller, I'm going to get distracted by looking at my computer all the time now with this new setup.
You should cover it with like a block.
Well, I'm supposed to be reading comments for the zeros of live followers that we have. I'm the only live follower. I can write my own comments.
Can you at least give us a like?
Where was I?
In episode 6.
It's management's fault.
Yeah.
Right? You just need to recognize it's management's fault. And there was a quote that we read in that episode, but I think it's worth repeating, which is ineffective management teams often say that they need greater funding to correct a sagging business, but throwing money at a problem does not work. Those who created the problem in the first place will not know how to fix it. So providing them greater resources is a mistake. It wastes money and degrades employee morale.
It's not about the Benjamins.
There you go. So you need to make a change. And even if you don't believe it in your heart, you still need to make a change, because you need to convince outsiders and your other employees, your team, that you're taking responsibility, you understand what the issue is, and you're making a change.
Have you ever run into a situation where, or heard of where a company approached a lender or, an equity fund and said, "This is our plan. This is our company. This is our forward-looking statements," and then it came to surface that they've had losses, significant losses over a long period of time, and it was actually the lender calling out, "Well, what are you going to do differently?" Are lenders ever, or do they just say no and give you no explanation?
Well, there are some lenders that specialize in this business, right, into lending to troubled companies. So they try not to just say no.
Mm-hmm.
So there are other lenders that are traditional lenders, and they would just say no, and they would be mad about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Why did you waste my time?
Right.
Right? But the specialty lenders, some of them do exactly the opposite of what this quote is that I just read. They just say, "Yeah, I buy into the fact this looks like a great company. I'm gonna give them a bunch more money, and I know they're not changing anything. I hope it's all gonna work out."
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you'd be surprised how often that doesn't work out.
Yeah. So it's just bad for everybody.
It's
Yeah. It's bad for everybody. Ultimately, and lenders, you can't expect it if you're a company, whether or not you realize you're troubled or not. If you're coming out to a lender, you can't expect them to hold your hand through the process for you with that and ask you questions like, "Well, what are you going to do? What about your HR costs, your admin costs, like your shipping costs? Like, what are you going to do?" No one's going to walk you through. We will, but they won't.
And a great deal of the time, I'm hard to put a percentage on it, but let's say half. Let's say 50% of the troubled companies that we work with, which is not our whole business, but it's part of our business, out of those companies, I bet you half of them received more capital, either from a new lender or from their existing lender in forbearance, on the condition that Sinclair Range continue to help that company. Right. So I've sat at new lenders meetings where they're doing the underwriting, and they bring in the borrower, and often they say, "You're not making this change. You've got a problem with your CFO, or you've got a problem with somebody. You need to make a change. So you can hire this guy over here. You can go find somebody else, but I'm not doing this alone until you've made a change that I'm happy with." So the answer to your question is yes. I see it all the time, and we're a decent solution for that. But this is not a commercial about us. Yeah. This is an idea that you need to make changes.
Yeah.
All right. So this moves us into point number 3, which I've called make a plan to fix the problem. And so here's the plan. I think it breaks down into 3 broad categories. Is address your management issue, which again, we have cheekily said, fire somebody. It doesn't have to be fire somebody. Maybe it's an augmentation issue. Maybe it's I didn't have somebody in this role, such as compliance.
Yeah.
Right. I went outside compliance and with whatever regulatory body, and we just didn't have this role covered. Period. So it's not like I need to get rid of somebody. I actually need to increase the team.
Although if you're having a hard time managing your cash, it's hard to hire more people, or even put it in your head that you can hire more people. You're financially troubled.
Right. But one of the big tricks to turnarounds is to focus your resources to the things that matter.
Right.
Right. And again, never lose sight of the fact that if you're trying to get money for a troubled company, you need to convince the third party that you've changed something. Right. So I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
But you need to figure it out. Right. You need to change something. And so it's not always about firing, but identifying that you, for example, didn't have a compliance person or a safety person or whatever got you in trouble, or a proper CFO or anything along those lines. It's easy to identify that we had this hole and now we need to hire.
Yeah.
More difficult for owner managers, mid-market businesses, smaller businesses More difficult to fire somebody who wasn't doing the job. Harder yet to blame yourself personally and try to create changes through advisory boards, third-party advisors, someone to walk with you through this difficult time. But let's talk more about firing someone, because I always think that's a greatly difficult thing that we don't always get right. But I don't get it right all the time.
It's hard.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on making changes in that one?
So one of the things that we talked about in episode 6 that you asked me to bring up when we do start talking about making these changes is having evaluation criteria as the entrepreneur, as the business owner, and be strict about it to eliminate emotional attachment to certain individuals within the company and actually evaluate them as professionals and whether or not they're doing the job. Now, when you have that criteria, that could work for promotions or whether you're moving people around, whether they're better suited in different roles. But at the same time, it's just good to have these evaluations, an objective valuation where the criteria is not fluid, where if somebody's not meeting expectations.
Do you have examples of that?
Yeah, sales is probably the biggest one that comes up.
Okay.
And it's just striking that I see it in almost every file that we've ever worked on, whether it's a high growth company or a troubled company where we come in as management or consultants, as advisors. But you always get value. We very often come across a scenario where they bring in a salesperson that's highly recommended, has many years of experience in the industry, seems to know everybody, who's a buyer, the serious buyer of the product or service that they're offering, but the sales numbers just don't come in, and they pay them a very high salary because of all the prior criteria, and they, but there's no actual performance. And you get so stuck in the past and the attributes that they brought to the position, and you don't really evaluate them on what they should be doing for the company.
So here's a good example of this. So here's a little trick for that on what you just said. We did it recently on a manufacturing company that we work with. You look at the salaries of the one or two or whatever number of people that you just that are in the position that you just described. And so our case, it was sales and marketing, operations, right? And we said to ourselves, okay, let's take that salary, let's divide it by our contribution margin on our product line.
Yeah.
And what we learned is that we would have to be doing
more than
100%.
Yeah.
150%.
Yeah.
More revenue to generate the margin just to pay those people. Right. There's an excellent example, right? Like, just put this into something tangible to avoid and get yourself out of the emotions and the personal nature of what we're talking about.
Maybe we should take a moment just to walk through the math on that, because I think that's an exercise that somebody could do at home on Excel or a spreadsheet or just back of the envelope. Take that person's salary, all inclusive benefits and any like car expenses, whatever you're covering. Know what your contribution margin is, meaning I sell my good for $10, my material, labor, what have you.
Variable costs.
My variable costs are $5, and then so it's by $5 is my contribution margin.
Yeah.
If the salary of that person is, I'm just gonna mix the number up, is like $120,000 per year. How many units of this product do I have to sell?
120,000 divided by 5.
Yeah.
Like 50%.
Yeah. That's the math that you would be able to do.
Right. So make it tangible, because what happens is, particularly in mid-market and smaller businesses, you have a relationship with these people.
People started with you,
right? And they have families, and they have people that they support with this salary, and it's a big deal. It's a big deal to let people go. And my belief is that when you start a turnaround, you have to take a decision tree right away. And for those of you on the podcast, I'm holding my hands up.
Like a tree.
With 2 branches of a tree. And the one branch would be what you should almost always do, but don't, is cut your costs, get them down to a reasonable level, pare back, focus hard, and then grow slowly from there, right? Or you decide, I bought into the dream. I'm going to take a chance on this.
Yeah.
Right? I know they haven't performed before. I know that the hockey stick revenue projection hasn't happened, but I'm going to sign up for that, right? Which is often wrong. But if you part of the decision making is you sit down with 3 or 4 people and you have this relationship and you want to give them a chance, right? Because they look at you and say, here's the 800 reasons that it's not my fault, that it's somebody else's fault, right? So in sales, I didn't have the resources, I didn't have this, I didn't have that. And it's not their fault. You have the connection. And so it's really hard to pull the trigger. And if you had objective criteria, like you just said, or if you use a trick, like I was talking about, which is just, I'm embarrassed to say in the example that I gave, it probably took me 3-4 years or longer to actually go through that math in my head and just say, this is stupid. Like, we're just never going to do that much revenue, right? And this is the guy driving it. It's just never going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. So clearly we need to make these changes. Right. And then another trick to this is you need to convince yourself that you're doing the right thing. Right. So let's say you have an employee and you need to make a change and this person's on your list. Let's say they're the worst person in the world, or let's say they're the greatest person in the world. It really doesn't matter. If payroll is at risk, if the company is going to go down because it hasn't cut its costs and everybody else is going to lose their job as well.
Yeah, think of everyone else.
If this person is not really wanted in this organization, that's why they're on your list to begin with. Are you doing them a favor by not firing them? I mean, do you really think that that's the honorable and correct decision? Or do you think you're just hiding and not making the tough decisions that are required, right? You need to make that hard decision, and you need to convince yourself that you're doing the right thing for everybody, not just for the organization and for all of the other stakeholders, all of the other employees, all of their families, right? Because if you don't survive, they're not going to get paid, right? But you're also doing the right thing for that person that you're letting go, because they don't fit in there, and they got to move on with their lives.
In all your turnaround mandates, when you had to let someone go, how many times have you regretted it 6 months, 3 months later?
0. 100% of the time, my regret is I didn't do it way earlier.
Yeah.
There's. I don't think the answer to what I just said is as easy as it sounds. That just may mean that I hang on to everybody too long, right? And I'm pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
Right, and I still hang on to people too long. It takes a long time to go through the thought process and convince yourself, I find. So make it quantitative as much as you can. Remember that you're doing the right thing for everybody. And that's really the trick to this. Okay?
And at the same time, when you free up those resources, in every company that we've dealt with, there's never just a pool of bad employees. There's always some that are trying very hard to not only do their jobs well, but also pull the weight of whoever's underperforming. So, and they might not be able to fulfill their all of their own goals because, the marketing budget is sucking up everything, but it's not actually turning into anything for sales, right? So they can't do their stuff because all the resources, the time, the energy is in this person's department, whereas they can't continue on.
Yeah. It's interesting, in a company that we went through a round of cutbacks. 2 in particular, one was sales and one was ops. This is the one we did the math on for the revenue. I would say that the person in sales was a personal friend, just because I've known him a long time and helped out his business. And the one in ops, I like her, but she came from a temp agency. It's not like we were buddies forever. Yeah, we got to know her a long time. Well, a long time, a year or whatever.
Yeah.
But it turns out, so the sales guy, from that perspective, was harder. But it turns out he was a bad guy.
Yeah.
Right? It turns out he was circumventing sales. He was working behind the back, directly with customers. He's messing around with our intellectual property, and this is all going to come home to roost, right, with him. Whereas the ops person, she's a great person, right?
Mhm.
She did her best, right? And she was doing a decent job. But I was able to say to her, there's just no role.
Yeah.
Right? It's not, that's the important part about it. Like, this is not about you. This is about, we literally are not going to be able to pay you in a month because I'm just sick and tired of putting money into this company personally.
Mhm.
Not happening anymore.
Right.
Right? So there's no role. And she just looked at me and said, you know what? I get that. I completely get it. Thanks for being so upfront and straight about it. So you're doing the right thing.
Do you think part of it is that you have to weigh whether if someone's a personal friend, but they're just draining you financially and emotionally, and
You have to separate those
Yeah, and-
decisions, right?
but at the same time, like how good of a friend are they if they're just, you know?
Well, it turns out not at all.
Right, yeah, that's my point, right? Like, yeah,
But I have
those-
so few.
Yeah. Sorry. Most people do, they just don't realize it.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
That's right. This is business. You don't
Yeah,
have any friends,
Very
right?
few people have friends.
Exactly.
They'll all come to your wedding, but they'll never come to your funeral.
I think Rudy Giuliani said it the other way.
Oh, did he?
Funerals are mandatory, weddings are optional. Very good advice. Speaking of advice, you're firing somebody, severance is always an issue.
Yeah.
Get legal advice.
There's no hard rule on this. You should seek legal advice. in
Sure,
every
there's
situation.
real rules on this.
But I'm saying you
like
should
it-
seek legal advice in every situation.
Well, unless you have a strong HR manager who knows what they're doing. For me, I don't.
I was gonna say you never like you're not an HR department guy.
I am not an HR department fan, depending on the company. Sometimes I am. We just hired a new HR person in one of our manufacturing companies, and he loves my performance evaluation system.
Great.
So I like him.
Did they have one before you?
No,
That's the importance of
and
employee evaluation
he doesn't have
criteria.
to write it. He's been on the job a week. I said, here you go. I stole this from Jack Welch in the 90s.
There you go.
And actually, I don't know if that's true. I think I was influenced. I don't remember if I stole it or not. I may have though. So get legal advice on the severance. But remember this always. Severance is an unsecured claim in Canada. I'm not sure about US jurisdictions or where that flows. I should know that, but I don't off the top of my head. I'll have to find out. But it's an unsecured claim. It means it ranks behind your bank, which means you can't take, secured creditors' money and pay out a bunch of severance. And one way around with that is to give working notice. And again, talk to your lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. You're not a lawyer. We have lawyers on the firm, but I wouldn't talk to them either. They're more in-house.
Yeah.
Talk to your counsel on this.
As in we keep them locked up in house.
That's right.
Yeah.
But we give, try to give working notice. So if someone's due a year, you don't necessarily have to write a check up front. You can give them notice. You could say, you've got a year and you don't have to, just stay home. You don't have to come in, but you're still on the payroll. And there's a built-in cash flow that you can afford. Because again, are you doing the right thing? If you're the terminated employee and you're owed a year, would you rather never collect it because the company went bankrupt because it couldn't afford to pay the unsecured claim and the secured creditor moved in? Or would you rather just stay on the payroll for a year, yet be free to go off and do your own thing?
Yeah.
Right? Check with legal counsel though, please.
And some even good people cannot act up in these kind of situations because of repercussions. So one of the things that you did was change laws, for example, on The Office.
And everybody gave me a hard time.
I didn't.
And in retrospect, that was probably pretty smart.
Yeah, brilliant, good. But that extends to if you're giving somebody a cell phone, taking away the cell phone, taking away the password to access the cell phone. Email's a big one. Make sure you change because there's remote access to servers.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Think of all the access
This guy
that
in
person has.
particular keeps. I keep getting emails about his conspiracy.
To his work email.
To this day.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Make a change because you need to. You need to do it internally. You need to do it for employee morale, and you need to do it to convince a lender, which is what we're talking about today. You need to convince them that you're willing to make the hard decisions and to make changes.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, let's move on to KPIs. You have some KPI points you want to talk about?
Not yet. Key
Not.
performance indicators.
All right.
Well, I think it's one thing is it comes back to having criteria, whether you're valuing your employees or you're valuing your performance. That nobody has hard criteria. People's criteria for whether or not the business is doing well or not is if it's making money.
Yeah. So here's.
So that's not a management tool.
Okay. It is a management tool, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about getting a company financed. This is the heart of a turnaround plan, because every single business, I don't care how complicated it is or detailed it is, you can still boil down the essence of success to 3 or 4 metrics.
And if you don't think that's true, you're wrong, and you should go back and revisit it. I'm not saying that sarcastically. I genuinely feel that way. We've said this to businesses, and they've said it's really complicated. You don't understand. It should be at least 10 KPIs.
Nope. 3 or 4.
Incorrect. Yeah.
Preferably 2, but you can't really get away with that. So we're dealing with a manufacturing company right now. By the way, I'm not saying that revenue is not a key performance indicator, but it should not be a key performance indicator in your turnaround plan. Okay, so you should not say revenue is 20 million, and to be a success, I need to go to 25. And that's a KPI that I'm going to track. Okay. Or 20 to 25 is where I want to be, and I'm going to track sub KPIs. I'm going to go into how many calls we did that day and closure rates and all that sort of stuff. Okay, that is, I'm not saying it's not important, but in a turnaround plan, you're going the wrong way. What you ought to say is, I used to do 30. Now I do 20, therefore I'm in trouble. I'm going to assume that come hell or high water, I can do 15 or 18, right? Even though I'm doing 20, I'm already blowing it out of the water. And I'm going to rebuild my balance sheet and my P&L to make money at 15 and 18.
Because you could be not profitable at 20 while being profitable.
You could be breaking at 20 or whatever, but you're just, if you're trying to convince, let's say you're a bank and a company comes into you that's doing 20 million revenue that used to do 30. And they said, this is all going to work out. We're going back to 30 million in revenue. Had a couple of hits. I lost a major customer. Things didn't go well. Here's my plan. Here's how I'm going to get back to 30 million and everything's fine. Would you rather hear that? Or would you rather hear, took those hits, I lost that major customer, I think I'm going to get them back. But I can't count on it because I'm going to run. Because if I don't get that customer back in the next 3 months, right, then I'm betting with your money, the new bank. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rebuild my cost structure to be profitable at 15 million and 18 million. But I'm still going to work to get to 30. Right? Which message would you rather hear as a bank? I mean, the second one is so much more persuasive. Right? And speaks to a credible management team, and it's the right thing to do.
I used to, and this maybe comes back to the salespeople and the criteria, and your point to costs and maybe a little bit of less revenue is better. I used to work for a small flooring company in Chicago when I was in university, and they had one sales guy who would knock everyone else out. Like, it would be like he would sell 2 million and the next guy would sell 1. So it was a big gap. But when you really dug into it, he was giving product away for 2 million. He wasn't actually making anything. It looked good. Right. The top line looked good, but it wasn't getting.
How did he get away with that?
Just because
he was setting his own pricing.
He was setting his own pricing.
In a small business, don't let your salespeople set your own pricing. It makes no sense.
And continue to manage sales.
Sorry to look at for a second. I'll never remember this point. We should do it on a future.
Sure, I'll write it down.
What do I say now? I can't say Periscope anymore. What do I say?
On your future Martinis with Scott. A future episode of Martinis with Scott.
Give them a pricing sheet with variability, right? So say our list is $100. You're allowed to sell this for 90 on the spot. Here's the 10 different types of discounts you can give. You can give volume discounts. You can just a straight up price cut. You
Yeah.
can give marketing rebates. You can do here's the ways to skin that cat.
Mhm.
And you can go to 90 on your own authority, but you can't go to 89.
Yeah.
If you go to 89, you got to go back to the manager of the used car lot,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And ask for permission. Sorry.
Yeah. No, and that's a great point. You still have to, and one of them is that a lot of the time, especially in smaller businesses, the owner manager is also a salesperson, so that's a lot of hats to wear, right?
Yes. I'm trying to happy face myself. Kissing heart. I don't want to do that.
No, just a happy face. Did you do it?
I didn't do it. I tried to do it.
Sorry.
Sorry,
This is the
podcast
only-
people.
this is
We're
the only
distracted
falls
by our
off
own.
by the
own
emojis.
All right. So KPIs, the 3 or 4 that drive every business. Manufacturing, spend a lot of time thinking about your variable costs. What should my direct materials be as a percentage of revenues, gross or net? What should my direct labor be as a percentage of revenue, gross or net?
Mhm.
What should my variable overheads be? And then my all other costs. It's unique to your business, so don't hold me to that.
Yeah.
Right? But we're working on turnaround right now, and that's it. And if you can identify the 3 or 4 key metrics that drive the business and that you can prove on a historical analysis. So, 3 years ago, my direct materials were 49%. And then 2 years ago, they were 51%. And then last year, they were 53%. And I'm on track to hit 54%. This year, you look at a manufacturing company, that's what's generating your losses.
Yeah.
Right there. And so if you
Eating
can
your
break
margin.
that down and say, well, my turnaround plan is get that 50% in direct materials down to 50, right? And here's a couple of broad ideas as to how I'm going to accomplish that goal, right? I'm going to redo my, I'm going to increase prices.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to attack my supply chain and make that more efficient. I'm going to have less waste or less, whatever it is. But if you can boil it down to the 3 or 4 metrics, you can communicate a turnaround plan.
Mhm.
You can measure a turnaround plan. You can get buy-in from employees. You can get buy-in from lenders and investors, which is what we're talking about today. Because everybody understands, wow, the direct materials got out of hand.
Yeah.
And they're going to fix that.
Yep.
Right? Simple as that. And it all boils down to the 3 or 4 items. That's in manufacturing. I ran a drilling company in Alberta in the energy industry. We were drilling wells for various purposes. Heavy fixed cost business.
Yeah.
Right? So
Right.
what is it there? It's direct labor, right? Not having people standing around as you're in between jobs, because what you do is you run at 120 or 150% capacity for 3 weeks, and then you do nothing for 2 weeks, particularly in a bad market, right? It's rig utilization, right? So there's just a handful of key metrics that you can focus on to drive your business, but also to communicate a turnaround plan that you understand what you're doing. Simple. You need to focus on simple. What else have we done? Marketing, direct response
Direct
marketing.
response.
Really, it wasn't marketing advisory. They were selling their own products through a direct response and globally. And it's MERs. It's media expense ratios. I always confuse that with management expense ratios.
Yeah.
From the mutual fund industry, it's a media expense ratio, which is every dollar I spend in media is going to generate revenue of, whatever.
Yeah.
And whatever used to be 3.
Yeah.
And now it's 1.2.
2.
Right? Not good enough. And so, and that plus margins on the product, those are, and then your overheads,
That's it.
right? Those
Yeah.
are your 3 right there. So that's what you need to focus on. How do you establish what the right number is? If you go back to MERs, media expense ratios, or if you go back to direct materials, the answer is history, right? So we put in a model, which we'll be talking about in future Martinis with Scott. We'll talk about models and sort of how to display it. You look at, say, 3 years history or 5 years history, basically go back 20 you're profitable,
Yeah.
and look at where that key metric went. And you're going to find it got worse if you picked your key metric correctly. So look at that, but also get someone like Olga, who's good at this, to do a bunch of comparable research. Talk about comparable research for a second. If I called you and said, we're moving into what's been presented to us lately, tool and die.
Mm-hmm.
We're moving into tool and die. There's an income statement. Give me some comparables. What would you do?
So if you have access, or somebody who has access to a database that's paid for, like we have Capital IQ. You don't always have to use Capital IQ, but they would actually be able to run a screen of comparable companies. You would enter that company in, and it would pop out some comparable names, public names, and spit out some ratios that you can compare yours to. Margins. Mainly margins for that. And you can calculate some by yourself depending on the level of public information that's available. But if you don't, you can go and look at annual filings, and I specifically say annual because there's much more detail. You can look quarterly too, but annual filings of companies in your industry. They might not be exact.
So go to Edgar.
Edgar or CDAR.
Go to CDAR in Canada. Edgar in the US. Get annual reports.
Yeah.
Of companies that are comparable to your business,
mm-hmm.
and that you admire, that you think they're greatly successful. Figure out their ratios,
and then
figure out their ratios over time.
And I think that's even better than just a spreadsheet of a number of companies and their ratios on Capital IQ, because you can actually look through the management discussion and analysis, and will explain what was happening. They will give their own explanation as to why they did better, why they did worse than the year prior.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that comes with the bias of their own interpretation.
Sure.
But on top of that, and I used to love reading these when I was in university. People think that's crazy, but there's something called an annual information form that a lot of companies put out in Canada. I don't know what it's called in the US. But it sometimes it's just part of the larger annual report, like the color, but what they put out, not just the 10K form.
Yeah.
Read through that, and it specifically talks about, there's a SWOT analysis of business, a really good detailed one if it's been properly prepared. It talks about the different business segments that it's in, the revenue streams, the demographics of its customers, the industry overall, what's impacting the future. It's really interesting if you really want to go behind the scenes of the business. That's really good to read if you're looking just for plans or best practices as well.
Excellent. And in Canada, MD management discussion.
Yeah, or an AIF. A lot of them, the bigger ones have an AIF. Go with that annual information form.
All right. Remember, so almost all your KPIs
mm-hmm.
are P&L, margins, overheads, but not all of them, right? So inventory is a good example. You're in the manufacturing business and you're carrying way too much inventory. That could be part of your cash flow, probably is. AR, accounts receivable, could be one of the issues. You could go to Kevin Westfall, you could go at Accord, you could go to First Vancouver Finance, you could get some of those receivables liquid.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not necessarily all income statement based, but it's largely income statement based.
And I think what we encounter is that maybe it boils down back to being afraid to go out of your comfort zone, even though it's not very comfortable for a troubled company. But people are scared to talk to Kevin Westfall about their AR because they just assume they're going to get rejected. But you get a lot of wisdom out of somebody like him to have a discussion about that. Same thing with inventory. If you're buying, we've seen companies hold like $5 million worth of inventory from 2-3 suppliers, and they're afraid to go to their suppliers and say, can we do a just-in-time delivery or a little bit more spacing instead of me having to hold 6 months worth of stuff? And they're afraid to do that. And the other answer is, well, if you need to understand that if they're saying no, you need to go and find out another supplier who will help you resolve your inventory issue. So it sounds like for a lot of people, they hear that, right? They're like, oh, in AR, well, I can't do anything about that. My clients pay when they pay.
The problem, well, exactly. The problem with Tom Clausen, let me reword that. There is no problem with these guys. You guys are great. The problem with clients going to them, and to Tom Clausen at First Vancouver, who was episode number 1. Yeah. And to Kevin at Accord, which was, I don't know, actually the last episode.
7.
7.
No.
Last was 8, but it hasn't posted yet because Periscope is a mess. The problem in going to these guys is these companies never tell the story that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. They never have a turnaround plan. They're not making the changes. They just simply go and say, man, we owe CRA or the IRS, we owe them a bunch of money, we have to pay them withholding taxes and what have you. And, they're going to garnish our accounts.
Yeah.
And we need cash. We can't pay our suppliers. People won't ship to us. We're on COD, but not even on COD. We're on COD plus 20%. Start paying down right? So they go to them with the problems, and they don't go to them with any solution.
Yeah.
Right? And both of those guys, they're great people. You could have an open conversation with them. You could say, here's what I'm thinking, and here's my experience, and I'm not 100% sure what your product is and how you could help, but let's just talk about that.
Yeah.
Both those guys would love that, 100%. That's right. Is when you go to them and try to buy something from them, being a factory program or whatever, without providing any color or comfort as to what you're trying to change to make this thing work. Or better yet, you go through a strong advisor. You go to a singular range or somebody like us, and there aren't any, but somebody like us, and we help you do that. We help you with that story. Which leads us into the third leg of the turnaround stool, which is cash flow. And we're going to talk in the future. We're not going to talk much about it today, but we're going to talk about modeling, and part of that is cash flow modeling, which you spend a great deal of your time on.
What's the only kind of modeling I could get into at 5:3?
At 5:30?
5:3. Too short.
There you go. You could do hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about cash flow more in the future. But I think when you're thinking about a turnaround plan, you need to think about change. You need to think about management.
Yeah.
Change, whether that be terminating people, augmenting the team, whatever that change is. You need to think about KPIs, and then you need to think about cash flow. And all I want to say about cash flow right now is that the point of cash flow is surviving until you're profitable, right? That's your cash flow plan. So as an investor, as a lender, you're going to say, okay, these guys admit they're in trouble. They're making changes. They're improving their management team, either by addition or subtraction, right? They know their KPIs. They were able to communicate to me that their direct materials were too high. That was the major issue. Or their media expense ratios were too low, and that's the major issue. And here's how they're going to work towards fixing that. You don't even need to have the answer. You just need to be able to identify the problem and have a general direction as to where you're going. And then the third leg to that stool is they will stay solvent as they implement these changes. That's what a cash flow is.
Because two of the three is basically you're building integrity with somebody you just met.
True.
Which is huge.
True. But the good news is that even if you weren't meeting somebody, you have to do that anyways.
Yeah.
That is a turnaround. What else you got?
That's it. Look at us.
We've been 48 minutes
That's good. Let's just
into a YouTube Live.
YouTube Live.
We're going to wrap this thing up. Thank you
Thank you.
for joining me.
Pleasure.
StClairRange.com. Look at us there and let us know what you think of the new platform, please. And the new book is great.
Perfect. Dylan.